I got my pumpkin carving done on Monday night. As I posted on Twitter, my feature work was supposed to be Bigfoot, but it ended up looking like a dancing Klansman. Take your pick. Whatever it looks like, I obviously missed the mark for creating a scary scene. I should have used what little art and carving talent I do have to depict this image of terror, a constitutionally prescribed swearing in of a Supreme Court justice who pledges to do her constitutionally prescribed job.
I love the Constitution and the democratic republic that it establishes, and I will devote myself to preserving it.
It's a real chiller. This woman in power strikes fear in every TikTok feminist Blair Witch rendition, suddenly terrified of a woman in power.
I'm scared for me, other women, people who need help. Everyone except white men.
Oh, of course it's racial somehow. See, if you don't find that scene at the White House frightening, perhaps you might even find it wholesome or encouraging. That's because you've been duped by the Republican weaponization of white motherhood. That's right. They cynically chose Barrett because she's immune to the criticism of those heard screeching, "Believe all women," in any other context. Well, don't whine about other people playing by the rules that you set. Besides, if complaining about white people and traditional femininity was strategically impossible, explain to me how the Huffington Post has been in business for a decade and a half. And why are you guys pulling out the big guns now? You had weeks to make these smears. You didn't. And now in the 11th hour when it matters none, you start running over Barrett like she's a Philly cop trying to stop a peaceful protest. Why now? Because it's an act. Because it's a show. Because there was a political calculation made that picking this fight before Election Day was too politically risky. So they decided to just lay down for it and let it happen and then feign outrage after the fact despite doing nothing to stop the developments they're supposedly so mad about. This year's Halloween anthem isn't Thriller. It isn't Monster Mash. It's One Last Cry.
One last cry, one last cry.
During the Senate vote, Mazie Hirono didn't think a simple nay was sufficient to express her passionate opposition. So she voted hell no and stormed out of the chamber.
Ms. Sinema, Ms. Smith, Ms. Stabenow.
I want to say hell no.
Now, it should be noted that outburst was during the S's. That was nowhere near her name call. Alphabetical order was apparently a challenge in pulling off a stunt that edgy. But hey, at least it was original. Her colleagues are still just recycling the same old tired "people will die" bit. If Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed, people will die. It's life and death stakes, says Senator Chris Murphy. Based on what? Unclear. People will be born if she's confirmed too, and people will still die even if she's not confirmed. She doesn't pull the levers of fate. And even if she did, in that case, maybe we should think about reducing federal power instead of consolidating it like you guys are constantly advocating. Regardless, that was the chosen line of the night. As one YouTube commenter described, the female Rachel Maddow was warning on MSNBC that this confirmation means 100,000 deaths.
They have participated in a project that has led to the deaths of probably 100,000 Americans who didn't have to die. They traded those lives for this justice. So all we can do is take that rage and channel it.
Well, you can always channel that rage by burning down property. That's a hot outlet these days. The best way to voice your opposition to this fabricated threat on lives is to explicitly threaten lives. That's the Reza Islan method. Recall he said a month ago, if they even try to replace RBG, he'll burn the place down. Dinesh D'Souza asked for an update, and Reza asked for his address. I would pay a silly amount of money to watch that even attempted. But by the way, that's just fine on Twitter. Go ahead, threaten away. Just don't post any original reporting contrary to the narrative. That'll get your account locked out for weeks. Threats aren't threats. Only actual journalism is. I could go on. The Halloween bucket is overflowing with tears this year in place of candy, and that's just as well. They're trying to ban trick-or-treating anyway, so we might as well enjoy this show instead. But the one last cry that's crucial to discuss came from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer giving his final pre-Barrett floor speech full of not just theatrics, but fundamental falsehoods and misunderstandings about the role of the court and the process for picking who sits on it. And I don't mean to undersell his performance. It surely was an award-winning high school drama club act. Monday was one of the darkest days in Senate history. A few wherefores or thous would make the language more Shakespearean, but still pretty good.
Monday, October 26th, 2020. It will go down as one of the darkest days in the 231-year history of the United States Senate.
Yeah, or it was just the Senate doing its job as it has over 100 times before. Weird how every time the Senate does its job lately, Chuck says it's lower and sadder and darker than ever before.
President Trump's nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court has been one of the saddest moments in the history of the Senate. Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation is a low moment for the Senate, for the court, for the country.
Chuck warns that Senate Republicans have forfeited all future credibility.
And Amy Coney Barrett may become the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, but you will never, never get your credibility back.
I'm not taking credibility lectures from a guy who called Julie Swetnick credible.
There are now multiple, credible, serious, and corroborated allegations against Judge Kavanaugh. The new affidavit by Mrs. Swetnick calls out for a thorough, impartial, detailed investigation.
And most preposterously, Chuck said Barrett's confirmation threatens generations yet unborn.
Generations yet unborn will suffer the consequences of this nomination. As the globe gets warmer, as workers continue to fall behind, as reactionary state legislatures curtail a woman's right to choose.
Okay, he has to be trolling with that line. Generations of unborn will suffer if we don't preserve the supposed constitutional right to kill generations of unborn. I thought your whole point was the unborn can't suffer. We have to protect the rights of the unborn to kill their unborn on demand. It's a paradox that warps my brain harder than the alphabet against Mazie Hirono. But what we can't warp, though, is the proper role and purpose of the court. And that is the substance of Chuck's speech, as well as several other Democratic responses. An appeal to public opinion, to popular will, and how Amy Coney Barrett is supposedly at odds with majority views.
Tonight, the Republican Senate majority decided to thwart the will of the people. Judge Barrett holds far-right views well outside the American mainstream, and those views matter.
Ilhan Omar made a similar point on Twitter. She says Republicans have lost recent popular votes, but they're still selecting justices, so we need to pack the court to make the court better represent the values of the American people. And Nancy Pelosi said that because our population has grown, so too should the court.
In 1876, there were 9 justices on the court. Our population has grown enormously since then. Should we expand the court? Well, let's take a look and see.
Representation of public opinion is not, has never been, and should not be a function of the court. That is a political function, not a legal one. The constitutional framers could have made Supreme Court justices elected. They didn't. They could have assigned Supreme Court Justice confirmation to the House to make the process more representative of popular will. They didn't. And there's a reason for that. It's specifically because they didn't want the court beholden to political whims. It's specifically because the role of the court is not to enact policy preferences. That's for Congress. The role of the court is only to faithfully and impartially apply the Constitution and the law as written. And ironically, that is a role that Amy Coney Barrett very clearly understands. It's the first thing she said upon her oath with Clarence Thomas.
It is the job of a senator to pursue her policy preferences. In fact, it would be a dereliction of duty for her to put policy goals aside. By contrast, it is the job of a judge to resist her policy preferences. It would be a dereliction of duty for her to give in to them. The oath that I have solemnly taken tonight means at its core that I will do my job without any fear or favor, and that I will do so independently of both the political branches and of my own preferences.
If you cry about Amy Coney Barrett's political opinions, perhaps her own words can console you. She has no interest in imposing them upon you. If you don't like the results that the impartial application of the law produces, well, I have good news for you. There's a process for that. It's called changing the law. And there's a branch for that. It's called Congress. That's your job, Chuck. That's your job, Mazie. That's your job, Ilhan. Thankfully, that's not Reza Islam's job, but you get my point. It's not a good look to whine and complain when you don't get your way by the rules as written, and to talk about changing the rules in response. But it's an even worse look to bitch about other people not doing your job for you. It's not Amy's job to do Congress's work, so give up on one last cry, and instead consider one last try of actually doing your job instead of always insisting that someone else does it for you. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Give up.